Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Geek Podcast. As I'm sure you're aware by now, Gina Carano, who played Cara Dune in the Mandolorian in the Star Wars universe, was fired yesterday for her post on Twitter and other social media. And there's been a very fierce debate about this firing, some believing that her rights have been infringed, others standing by her dismissal. Now, I am a very fierce first right advocate, but I'm also someone who understands that when it comes to the First Amendment, that only means that you're protected from speech infringement from the government. That means the government can't tell you what you can and cannot say. Now, Gina Carano was employed by Disney on this show. Disney is a private enterprise. It's a private corporation. And as much as you may disagree with what she said, you may think she has a right to say it. She has a right to be protected from the government telling her not to say that, which of course they didn't, because the government did not interfere in this. It was a private corporation, Disney, that dismissed her for what she said, which is, according to the law, within their right. As it is, if you disagree with their decision, you can say, hey, Adam, I'm not going to do anything with Disney or Star Wars anymore. That is your right. That is the free market expressing itself. Now, I fully agree with the dismissal. Gina Carano was told on more than one occasion that if she continued to make such statements, that it could very well result in her dismissal. Well, she kept saying what she was saying, and she has subsequently been fired. Now, to those people who say, well, what about her First Amendment rights? Like I said earlier, the only thing the First Amendment does is protect you from the government persecuting you for expressing your free speech. It doesn't protect you from a private enterprise from expressing your opinion. It doesn't protect you from your company finding your social media posts. And I understand it's frustrating. Let me tell you a story. When I worked at Walmart many years ago, I made quite a few posts very critical of Walmart. I used to call it Hellmart. I was actually told not to use that word. Not by a supervisor, but by fellow employees. I refrained from it to a great extent, but never completely discontinued it. Now, I was fired from Walmart, ostensibly because of supposed, quote, bad customer service, but when I asked for an example of this, the example they gave was very nebulous at best. I can't prove in a court of law they fired me for what I said about Walmart on Facebook, but given what I said, and it was, in my opinion, adequate, because I was very critical of the way they treated their employees and customers and the way they did business. I suspect that is the real reason why, or at least one of the main reasons why I was forced to leave that company. Is it the only reason? No. I'll tell you the truth about it. I was miserable there. I hated the place. But when you ask for an example of being written up for something, and they don't give you a specific example or examples of it, and it's nebulous at best. Some sort of, it has led me to believe that there were ulterior motives, whether from on high or more than likely somebody saw something and they didn't like me to begin with and used that. So I can't prove in a court of law that was the reason why I left Walmart. Not that I'm arguing the point, because quite frankly, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. And let me stress this: there are people who like working at Walmart. There are Walmarts that have a good working environment, and I'm happy for those people that work there. I was in a Walmart that wasn't a good working environment, at least for me. And I'm certain other people will agree with me, some people that I worked with. So that's beside the point. Gina Carano is a public figure. That means that anything she says is subject to criticism. And there are right-wingers who are saying, well, she should have been fired for what she said. Well, there are people who express liberal opinions in conservative workplaces that get fired all the time. It happens. I've known of examples of people who've had bumper stickers for Democratic candidates in this area who were punished or let go from their jobs because their employers were heavily Republican. It happens. It ain't fair. It ain't right. But it happens. And I'm sure in other cases that's happened where Republican conservative people who've had bumper stickers for Bush or Trump or whatever have been let go because of their employer was Democratic. Now, if that's all they had, I disagree with it. The thing about Gina Carano was she was making very offensive statements. Statements that were transphobic, anti-Semitic, and in large part seen by many people in a wide swath of not just liberal people, but moderates and even to an extent conservative people as being offensive. Let me stress something here right now. Just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Anything you post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, is as if you were saying it on a television set, going out to millions of people around the world, or on a radio station being heard by thousands upon thousands of people. This podcast, for example, even though I'm sure not many people are listening to it, my employers, I won't mention who they are, could very well hear this and go, I don't like what he says. Now, that would be a very big stretch because I'm not exactly saying anything controversial here. I'm simply saying that Gina Carano deserved to get fired because she said things that her employers didn't like her saying, and it was relayed to her that she should stop saying it, because if she didn't stop saying it, she would probably get fired. Now, if I go to my employer and start talking crap about Jews, which I obviously won't because I'm not anti-Semitic, and my employer warns me not to say that stuff on the work site, and I keep doing it, I'm going to get fired. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, it sucks that what you do online can be grounds for dismissal. But think about this. Before the internet, if you went to a public forum, and let's say you were expressing an opinion that went against the mainstream of your community. I'll take an example. 25 years ago or so, in my local community, there was a debate on the county commission about a declaration that gave the homosexuality was bad. Some kind of declaration. It wasn't a law or anything like that. It's basically saying the community looks at gay people as being bad. I'm struggling to figure out the word here. Sometimes I blank out like that. I'm smart, but I'm not a genius, okay? It was a fierce debate. The vast majority of people who got up supported that resolution. Who supported that resolution were people who spoke at the debate. There were some who were against it. Theoretically, if you were, and I don't know if anybody got punished by their employer or whatnot for speaking against that resolution, because it's 20 some odd years ago, and I didn't, because I didn't know about it until after it happened. I didn't know they had the county commission meeting until after it happened. That was back in the day. We didn't have the internet, and you had to read the newspaper, and sometimes I didn't always read the newspaper. So, theoretically, let's say I had gone to that meeting and spoken against the resolution, which I was fiercely against, by the way. And it was known because I'd said so much in my workplace. Let's say my employers didn't like the fact I said that. Or there were customers who didn't like the fact that I said that. Theoretically, they could complain to the manager. The manager may decide that what I was saying was not good for the company, and I could get fired for it. Now, back then, the chances of that were a lot less obvious because really, you didn't have the internet back then. You didn't have the ability to just have stuff. You didn't even have texting back then. You had to actually have the evidence that you said what you said. You know, and that's what gets a lot of people. They don't understand that if you post, like say if I were to post something homophobic on my Facebook page, that's as if I said it on camera. And if my employer sees this, they could fire me. Theoretically, I could say something that supports LGBT communities. Theoretically, my employer could fire me for that. Now, the chances of that happening to someone like myself aren't necessarily that great. And looking back at what happened with Walmart, it was cumulative. I pretty much said a lot of critical things almost from the start of my employment because I knew exactly what I was getting into. I was not as wise as I am now about the impacts of social media, and nobody else really was because it was a relatively new thing back then. Now, I can't say 100% for certain that that was the reason why I got let go from Walmart, but let's just say that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to support that theory. Now, let me stress, I ain't exactly looking back and complaining about it because, quite frankly, almost 9 years since I left that place, I ain't exactly sad that I got dismissed from the place. And that's the thing. The lesson I learned is be careful what you put online. Know what you're saying. Know that if you put that out there, that you could catch hell for it. whether it be from family, friends, people in the community, your employers. The only thing is that protects you, according to the First Amendment, is that you can't get arrested for it unless you are making direct threats against people. And that's where the First Amendment does have limits. If I were to say that I'm going to the county commission meeting armed because I don't like what they're saying and putting a gun to their head saying, you cannot pass this resolution or you have to pass this resolution. Now, I could get sued for that. I could get arrested for that. But if I said I disagree with the resolution and said I'm going to go up there to speak against it, and I got arrested for it, then that is a First Amendment case. Now, if I were to go to that same meeting and post on Facebook that I'm going to go to the same meeting and disrupt it by yelling, fire the meeting, and causing people to panic and leave, I could be arrested for that because that's considered to be endangering the public. When you make threats or endanger the public, directly endanger the public like that by creating a panic, by yelling fire in a board meeting, then that is grounds for it. There are limits to First Amendment. They are broad limits. But what happened to Gina Carano was something that she should have known better to do. There are plenty of people who I know personally, unfortunately, that have similar views. And they have expressed them on Facebook. The reason they don't get fired is that their employers either don't know about it or don't care. Or in some cases, they own the business they run. And the people that go to the business either don't know about it or don't care. And here's another thing. If you express an opinion, you have to understand that it's going to come back to you, that the possibility of it's coming back to you is there. Now, I know fully well that my criticisms of Donald Trump in this community could have had an impact on certain things, whether it's getting a job or ever else. But here's the thing. It's up to you. Do you accept the consequences of free speech? That what you say could be held against you by an employer, by a church, by a civic group, by your friends or family? The price of freedom isn't free. It isn't without consequences. And Gina Carano found out those consequences yesterday. Disney is a private entity. They're a privately owned corporation. Yes, they have shareholders. Yes, you could buy stock in Disney, but they are not government run. And even if they accept government funding, even that doesn't protect Gina Carano. Because it has to be directly from the government. Now, you as a citizen or a consumer have the right to not watch The Mandolorian, to not buy anything Star Wars related, because you don't agree with what they did to Gina Carano. That is your right. But the fact is that Gina Carano was warned about this. And I go back to what I said. She was warned about this. she didn't have the right. There's always a morals clause in every contract like hers with Star Wars. And that basically gives these companies, these entertainment companies, an out, so to speak. If Pedro Pascal sexually abused a woman, which he's not, I'm not saying he did anything like that. Theoretically, let's say he was caught sexually harassing or abusing another woman. They could fire him for it. Let's say Katie Sackhoff, who's on the show as well as Bo-Katan. Let's say she got behind the wheel of a car and drove drunk and injured a kid, hitting a kid and injured him. Theoretically, they could fire her for it because of the morals clause in every contract. Every athlete in every professional sport has it. Every actor or producer, whatever, has that in their contract. It's to protect the people who are financing it or producing it or whatnot from what they see as negative publicity. And that's what happened here. Disney executed the morals clause in Gina Carano's contract and let her go from the show. Perfectly legal. It's happened plenty of times before. And theoretically speaking, let's say it was somebody else who was saying some very far left things, like that were very disagreeable. They could get fired. They could fire for that too. They could have fired somebody for that too. Freedom of speech does not mean that you can say whatever the hell you want to and there are no consequences. It only protects you from the government repressing your freedom of speech. It does not mean you can't lose your job unless you're in a state that has those kind of protections against your employers, and most states don't, including the one I live in. And the sad statement of fact is, yeah, in this state where I live in, if the employer doesn't like you for any reason, they could fire you. Doesn't matter how good of a job you do. Doesn't matter how long you've been there. Doesn't matter how well you're liked by your fellow employees or by other people. If the person above you that has direct say-so whether or not you continue on your employment there says, I don't like you, you're gone. Unless the people above them say otherwise, you have no recourse. That's what living in an at-will working state is like. But Gina Carano's case is far different. She signed a contract. Within that contract's morals clause, which basically protects Disney from being, in their view, defamed by someone in their employee in their employ. If, let's say, who's another person on that show? Let's say that Elizabeth Olsen, who's on WandaVision, were to all of a sudden start bashing Disney for some of their business practices constantly. And she was told, you keep talking about Disney's business practices like you are, you could get fired from WandaVision. And she continues to do it. A lot of people may agree with her. A lot of people may support her. But Disney could still fire her, and it's well within their right to do so. As it is well within your right to say, okay, you want to fire Elizabeth Olsen from WandaVision for what she said about Disney, and she could very well be telling you the truth about it. You have the right to boycott Disney products. That's your right. There are people on the right wing right now, incels, the so-called deep state phobia people, whatever, because I was in a discussion online. I shouldn't get into these things, but I made a comment and somebody else brought up the deep state, that Disney's part of the deep state. At this rate, the deep state's everybody that doesn't like Trump, okay? That's pretty much it. If you don't like Trump, you're part of the deep state. I guess I'm part of the deep state. Yay! I'm part of this organization. Do I get a t-shirt or a hat or something like that? A cool t-shirt and hat? Do I get a jacket? Do I get a discount at wherever? Maybe McDonald's or something like that? I'd take $10 off of 10% off of a Happy Meal. Be part of deep state. It's this asinine stuff, and unfortunately, Gina Carano. And here's the thing: there are a lot of people who are conservative who don't think the same way. They're not homophobic. They're not transphobic. They're not anti-Semitic. That express conservative opinions every day, but they don't talk the way that Gina Carano does, or others like her do. And they work in Hollywood. They work in a lot of businesses. They understand that, yeah, they're not part of the mainstream. There's nothing wrong with being conservative, except when you become a bigot. And bigotry, no matter if you're conservative, liberal, whatever, should be tolerable. And yes, there are some liberals who are anti-Semitic, because they look at what's going on in Israel with the Palestinians, and they just blame Jews for it. They don't look at it as going, well, they don't separate the religion from the political stuff. Yeah, I think what they're doing to the Palestinians is bad. I don't blame it on all of Judaism. I blame it on certain politicians that because they want to keep their support amongst the hardliners in Israel, that's the way they go about it, which I think is detrimental in the long run for both Jews and Israelis and Palestinians over there. Because it's going to continue to have this constant state of near war over there, where you don't have a resolution that settles that situation. But expressing an opinion about it puts you at risk. You could be perceived by some people for bashing Israel, or even criticizing Israel, respectfully criticizing Israel as being anti-Semitic by some people. Now, just because you're criticized doesn't mean you're automatically going to get fired. But there is that risk. And I have expressed criticism for Israel, not by being anti-Semitic, which I'm not anti-Semitic. I think the world's Jews are fine and all this. I'm not Jewish myself. I've known plenty of Jewish people, some very good Jewish people. There's a separation between criticizing the religion, bashing the religion, and criticizing the political policies of a sovereign nation, which Israel is a sovereign nation. And that's what I criticize, the policies of that sovereign state, not the religion itself. Just like I criticize stuff here at home. So what happened to Gina Carano was justified. She was warned of her actions. Her employer didn't like what she was saying. Many of the fans of that show didn't like what she was saying. They were rallying. They were saying they were doing hashtag Fire Gina Carano. All she had to do was say, I'm sorry if my statements have offended people, and kept quiet. Didn't mean she'd have to change her opinion. And once she was done with that role, she could go on whatever she said and go to Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity, which I'm sure she'll do now. Play the victim. But the truth of the matter is, she was told what was going to happen if she kept on, and she kept on. And within their legal rights, Disney dismissed her. You may not like it, but it's legal. And the truth of the matter is, if you want to blame somebody for it, blame the Republicans. They watered down unions. They made so-called right to work a big deal. Because where I'm at right now, I get fired for any reason or no reason. My boss could say tomorrow, I don't like you being here anymore, John. Bye-bye. You're gone. And I'm SOL. Out of luck. Oh well. Now I can collect unemployment. I could theoretically fire wrongful dismissal within the corporate structure. Whether that'll do any good or not, I could theoretically legally sue, saying that that Gina may sue, which will probably not go anywhere. Or Disney might go, you know what, we'll just throw some money at her and have an out-of-court settlement to just shut her up. Which more than likely will happen, because Disney's like, oh, we'll settle out of court for a certain amount of money. And only way she goes to court with that is she wants to make herself a legal martyr. Because she won't win that case. And the more I think about it, it's like, how stupid can you be to continue saying the things you're saying, knowing that your employer could pull the plug on your role at any time? And there are a lot of folks, well, what about the liberals in Hollywood? They're offending conservatives. Well, guess what? The same thing can happen to them. If enough people get mad about something and they don't want to, and they say they're not going to watch it, theoretically, a person bashing Trump could get fired from their job. And as a matter of fact, that has happened. Even though he wasn't fired from the company, he left. Scott Pelley was let go from CBS Evening News and sent back to 60 Minutes because he kept criticizing Donald Trump. There are other examples of this. There are consequences to free speech. If your employer doesn't like you criticizing Donald Trump or Joe Biden, even though the government figure, because they're not part of your employer is not part of the government, they could theoretically fire you. And that's the thing about it that people don't understand. They think that because that we have the First Amendment, that means you can say whatever you want to, and there are no consequences to your actions. Well, there are. If I were to go to your workplace and call you every name in the book, your boss has the right to call the police and have me removed from your employer work. And I could say, well, this is true about this person. I've got evidence of this. This person did this to me. Yeah, I may have the right to say it, but not in your workplace, because your boss has to make sure that they have a safe workplace. and me going over to your workplace, calling you every name in the book because of something you may or may not have done to me, I could, even though I'm not doing anything more than just not even making any threats, just calling you every name in the book, accusing you of stuff. That may be, in some people's minds, free speech, but I'm on private property, and if your employer doesn't want me there, he or she can have me removed. It's that simple. So, in conclusion, and I know I've rambled on a bit, Disney had no other choice, because if they kept her on there, the ramifications would have been that potential sponsors of programs on their commercial fronts, like ESPN, ABC, and whatnot, could have pulled their ads. Now, also, there is the risk that the right-wingers could mount a protest in support of Gina Carano and say, I'm going to boycott Disney. I'm not going to support anything of Disney. And demand sponsors pull their ads. And they may. But will that do any good? Remains to be seen. Generally, they don't. It has to be a massive movement to get these companies to budge. And it took a lot of backlash for Disney to pull Gina Carano from that show. A lot. It wasn't a deep state. It wasn't some left-wing conspiracy. It was the fact that enough people had said to Disney that this can't be tolerated. And thus Disney didn't tolerate it anymore. They let her go. Well, that's it for now. I figured I'd come on here to talk about that. I know I need to do the B5 watch-alongs. Truth of the matter is that work is got me a little stressed right now. There's some stuff going on at work I can't talk about. I won't talk about it here because they get me fired. There is confidentiality stuff I got to be careful of. But I'm hoping that things settle down a bit, and then in the next couple of weeks I can actually start doing the watch-alongs. And I'm not sure how often I'll do it, because I don't want to promise something I can't deliver. I may do like an episode a week, maybe 2 or 3, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anyhow, that's it for now. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you found this informative, thought-provoking. I'll talk to you later. Good night, good luck, and may the good news be yours.